everyone. Welcome to another episode of the TF podcast. I'm Jonathan G. Blanco. Please make sure that you are subscribed and you are following this on our social channels at JG Product at TF Blockchain. I'm really excited for this next episode where I'm going to be with Francis Dewing, and we are talking about cybersecurity. So definitely an interesting topic that I honestly don't feel like has been getting enough attention in these interesting times as it should. One of the main reasons I wanted to have Francis on the show. But as we're all working from home more and relying on a lot of third-party services, this seems like something that we should be talking about. So with that, Francis, thanks so much for joining us. And I'd love if you could introduce yourself really quick.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm the CEO and co-founder of a company called Rubica, and our specialty is providing advanced cybersecurity to people and teams. We started Rubica 4 years ago, my co-founder and I, and it actually spun out of another security company that I was the chief operating officer of, called Concentric Advisors. And Concentric does a lot of mostly physical security services, but very kind of wide-ranging and nuanced security for very high-profile individuals. So basically, we started this whole business servicing billionaires, essentially, and realized that there was a much broader need for more advanced cybersecurity, and that a lot of it, a lot of cybersecurity is built for IT professionals and enterprise, and it's not really built for people. Yet it's now something that everyone needs. And we felt that, truly it's almost become a individual rights issue. I think everyone deserves access to meaningful security online and, deserves the right to be safe online. And yet all that most of us have are kind of cheap and ineffective things like antivirus and LifeLock, or you have to kludge together like 12 different things to have any semblance of security. So that was really the impetus for creating Rubica. And before my time at Rubica and at Concentric in the security world, I was an attorney. I was actually doing civil legal aid on this kind of social justice public interest side. So kind of completely different than where I am now, but I think that there is a tie-in in that. I do believe that cybersecurity has become something that is a social justice issue in terms of access, and it's something that our digital and physical lives are intertwined now, and everyone has kind of these protections in our society around your physical safety that we just don't have in the digital world, the same rights. And I think it's the movement is towards making those things more intertwined.
Yeah, that's a super interesting point of view, and I definitely agree and see that, right? Like the way we think about data and data privacy is there's so much privacy fatigue. They're like, okay, fine, I will, give you access to this sort of thing because I'm just so used to giving you access to, so many other things, right? And so I'd love to talk. I love if you could touch more on like that need for the self-sovereign aspect of it, right? Like, so for like being in charge of your own security and your own identity, or having the ability to keep yourself secure overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I admittedly am not very deep on blockchain, but I think that is one of the most compelling use cases in terms of truly providing a way for people to authenticate without needing to give up their identity. And yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things that gets conflated a lot is security and privacy are definitely related, but they're different.
Okay.
And I think the way I kind of conceptualize that is, if you think about like a celebrity, somebody whose job it is to be in the media, you may not have the luxury of privacy anymore, right? You because of your career, everyone knows where you live, you've got paparazzi following you around, but in no case would we think it would be acceptable for that person to have to also give up their security, right? Like their physical safety. Yet today, what happens is, privacy should be a choice. You should be able to make an informed decision about what you do and don't make private. And obviously that's an issue today. There's like no informed consent. But I think the bigger issue is that by giving up your privacy, we also are giving up our security, and those should not be the same choice.
Yeah, and so I love if you could kind of pull the curtain aside and like what's behind the curtain that a lot of us might not realize when it comes to our privacy and our security on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the mistakes that people make is thinking, forgetting kind of how intertwined everything is. And I think a lot of people are looking for a silver bullet and kind of oversimplifying um, their security and privacy into these little buckets when in fact it's all related to the devices you use, the networks you use, the accounts and services you use online. Um, I also think that one of the biggest kind of um, scary things that's continuing to increase in my mind is you made the point that we're all kind of used to giving up our privacy and our data in order to use services. And I think some people feel like, oh, I have nothing to hide. I don't mind if I get personalized ads because they're tracking my clicks online and my geolocation and my demographics and whatever. That's an overly simplified view of how that data can be used against you.
Uh-huh.
And it's not really about whether you have something to hide per se. If you just think about geolocation as one example, if I can um, very accurately track that phone in your pocket and where you are at any given time, I know your route to work. I know where you stop along the way. I can probably tell if you're a smoker, if you go to the gym, if you go other places. I can tell a lot of things about your life and behaviors and what drives you. And I think that we saw some of that with in the election and in some of the other documentaries that came out around that, where this isn't just about um, this is about being able to not just predict but influence people's behavior. And
Mhm.
that's kind of the scary thing. and
Yeah.
and where that kind of ties into security, again, just kind of sticking with mobile phones, we've seen a huge uptick in the last year in applications that have legitimate functionality. They're offered in the App Store. They're things like weather apps or puzzle games or you name it, kind of in the category. But what they're doing behind the scenes is when you download them, they're gaining extreme kind of permissions on your device to not just access information but use that.
Hmm.
And that's a kind of a new wave of malware, basically, is masquerading as these legitimate apps that then do other nefarious things once you download them.
I feel like that shouldn't even be allowed, right? Like why is that even a thing? Like how,
Yeah,
that's even possible, within
it's
those
really
app
hard to
ecosystems.
police.
Okay.
Yeah, for the app stores, I mean, if you think about it, it's not illegal to make an app that has access to your contacts or tracks your geolocation. It's about whether that functionality is truly needed. So, for example, if you have a secure communications app, whether that's Signal or WhatsApp, that app needs access to your contacts and your phone, right? That's
Hmm.
like what it's for. There's no reason that a weather app needs access to your emails and your contacts.
Yeah.
So, but that level of scrutiny isn't happening in the App Store. They're not. They kind of don't see that as that part of their job to scrutinize that, and it's just it's really easy to sneak those through.
Totally. Just because you brought it up, how secure really is Signal and WhatsApp? They talk about like end-to-end encryption and things like that.
Yeah.
Is it in fact as secure as it's out to be, or it's made out to be? That you think?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you asking that question, because I actually think this also ties into the blockchain and crypto community, where I see a lot kind of overemphasis on the like putting all your eggs in one basket in terms of thinking like, oh, this service is encrypted and the encryption's really good. But your kind of secure communication is only as good as the devices on either end as well.
Hmm.
So that tunnel might be completely secured, but if you have malware on the device that you're using to access that text
Right.
message, email, phone call, then it kind of doesn't matter. And
Yeah.
that's, again, kind of back to this point of, I think people tend to focus on like, oh, I have a password manager or I have encrypted email. But you really need these layers and all of these areas, your devices, your internet connection, and your accounts. they all need to be secured all the time, because if you ever have one of those exposed, the rest of the measures that you're putting in place kind of are moot.
Yeah, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, no, I always find these types of conversations super fascinating. I have a theory that I don't know if it's valid or not. Kind of on the data as well is, um, it seems as though when the people that are aware of their data being used against, I don't want to say used against them per se, but being used and monetized. Um, it seems like there's two main issues there, aside from like if nefarious activity happens. One is that they were not aware of it, right? Or maybe they chose to be blind to it, either or. And then two, they didn't get to participate in the monetization of their data. I'm curious if you've thought about that, in data monetization and um, ownership participation of that. I'm curious on your point of view on something like that.
Yeah, I think, the CCPA, the California Privacy Act, is one step towards that. I mean, that, there's language in that law about basically acknowledging that you have the right to your own data
Hmm.
and it's your asset. And I think that that is the way that the country is going to move in terms of, to your point, making you the owner of that. And you should be the one to, if anyone's going to monetize that or capitalize on that, that should be you, because that's your asset.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is that this is going to have to come, like any large kind of social movement, it's going to have to come from the ground up, because I just don't see policy or government moving fast enough. And I don't, and there's just too many big lobbyists on the other side. There's lots of industries that are built around selling our data. They are not going to let this happen easily.
Right.
Um, but I think that, consumer sentiment is that is, people care a lot more about their privacy now, and they're kind of recognizing that this stuff needs to change. So I think the more pressure that we put on both companies and politicians to move kind of legislation that way, it will happen. It's just only a matter of time.
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing that I'm sure you're probably super aware of, and versed in is, so, COVID-19 is obviously going on right now. And so there's these contact tracing apps, right? And like, Google and Apple have said that they're, basically, participating or allowing this to happen and so forth. And, from one side of it, you can say like, oh, this is great. We'll know when people are sick and you can get a text message. I've seen, those on Twitter where people are like getting text messages saying, hey, someone that you were around was sick. But what about the abuse side of that, or like, how that can be misused overall by entities themselves, government, whatever, what are some of the things that people should be weary of in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you bring up a really important point that um, we all need to be kind of like shaking our fists about. It Privacy has to be part of this conversation. If we let all of this happen without having that be part of the formation of how we roll this out and do this, then it's never going to get rolled back.
Yeah.
And I think it's like any sort of technology, though. You can't stop the forward movement, and there is a compelling. We should be using technology to better the world, right? And whether that's artificial intelligence or tracking viruses, it just that we can't do that at the expense of our privacy and our rights, and it has to be part of that balance. So I guess I don't have the answer right now, other than we all need to be making that part of the discussion, and make sure this doesn't end up like some sort of a a something that we get used to. I think that
Right.
that's the other challenge, is that people just kind of once again get used to their data being used a certain way, and they kind of forget that it's happening, and that's the dangerous part.
Yeah, the evolution of the privacy fatigue, basically,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, it's and so that kind of leads to the next question of what cybersecurity threats or just threats in general has the COVID-19 pandemic brought about, right? A lot of us are online, maybe more than we used to be. We're having conversations online. we're connecting to devices more and so forth than usual.
Mhm.
But not just individual. What's crazy to me too is like not just individual. Like the Fed was just, they had a call, yesterday, and they're using Zoom, right? And like, so you have like major government entities and corporations using Zoom or Microsoft or whatever they're using, right? So it's not just at this like one-to-one level. It's massive. So what are the threats there? It feels like a you know like a party for anybody that would be you know wanting to hack or in a nefarious way.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually been posting a lot about this on LinkedIn recently because there's all these secondary downside effects of the pandemic that are just as serious as the pandemic itself.
Hmm.
There's food insecurity, there's the economic crisis. Cybersecurity is one of those things, and you're absolutely right. Cyber criminals are looking at this as a huge opportunity. Um, Really, there's kind of two kind of buckets of things that are happening. One is cyber criminals are opportunistic. They're going to use any sort of trend as clickbait for their phishing, social engineering, malware campaigns. And that, frankly, it's nothing new. They're reusing kind of tried and true methods, just in new packaging, which is
Hmm.
the coronavirus packaging, right? Because they know that we're all looking for information, and they can socially engineer and phish people in a more effective way. And they're also capitalizing on kind of secondary trends, like you said, like Zoom, Amazon deliveries. All these things are being impersonated and spoofed in order to get people to click and steal your credentials, get infected, etc. But the second thing, though, is this 100% of people working remotely 100% of the time. And the challenge with that, frankly, I think our world was moving that way anyways. We've
Hmm.
all kind of become remote workers. We're on our phones all the time, work and personal. But this has kind of pushed us over the edge, off the cliff faster, and a lot of people weren't ready for this. And the biggest insecurity is that we're all now accessing our sensitive work files, doing our jobs from our insecure home networks with,
Hmm.
like you said, using new tools that in order to, continue to connect into our jobs, but that have been rolled out really fast without necessarily putting all the security measures in place, and without IT support on site to hold people accountable and make sure all of this has been done the right way. Um, and cyber criminals are absolutely capitalizing on that. They also know that when we're at home, there's a lot of kind of personal and work activities going on at the same time.
Right.
Like if you've got kids, you're like downloading their homework assignments from some Dropbox link, and then checking Facebook to keep in touch with your friends, and then doing your work from that same device. And those are all opportunities for kind of cross infection.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like some super big, definitely some big risks there. And so, you talked about when we started the conversation, people think of antivirus as like this key, right? And so it seems like we're probably beyond the antivirus portion. So, how could you kind of relay that to someone of how antivirus versus like maybe what they should in fact have an additional precautionary measures for?
Yeah, the fact is that antivirus just doesn't work very well against modern malware. There was a report from WebRoot that came out just late last year saying that 93% of all malware now is polymorphic, which means that it can evade detection in real time and evade kind of rule-based systems like antivirus. It's
Mhm.
specifically designed to be able to evade things like antivirus, and that's 93% of all malware now. So what we really need, and again, this is kind of what Rubica's mission is all about, is there's some really more effective methods and tools available for enterprise in
Mhm.
terms of being able to monitor at the network layer, really monitor all the data flowing in and out of your devices to be able to detect anomalies and suspicious indicators that are known to kind of signal malware or malicious activity. Those have historically only been available to enterprise. And there are companies now, Rubica being one of them, that are trying to bring that capability to individuals so that we can have something more than just, antivirus and LifeLock, like you said.
Yeah, it's yeah, it's really interesting to me how yeah, I think there's even privacy fatigue when it comes to that, right? Like even when it comes to just like the whole how people think of antivirus or how they think of what's on their machines. A lot of the people that I know, when they think of antivirus, they basically just think of their computer being slower,
Right. Right.
overall, because you have something running on there. So um, when you think about, and a lot of people that are probably listening to this actually are VPN type of people, and so I feel like that's kind of like a little evolution of the antivirus software. um, where do VPNs play in all this? Like, I'm assuming VPNs themselves can be malware. And now a friend of mine joked about, he used to always say like that, how VPNs were just government run VPNs basically.
Uh-huh.
and, like, and I was like, I was like, I don't know how to answer that, but I'd love to hear kind of your point of view when it comes to just how people are using VPNs and like the need or what they actually do achieve overall.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, first you make a good point that, like, with any technology, you have to be able to trust the maker and trust that reputation,
Yeah.
because the same piece of software can be used for good or evil. It's
Right.
just technology. Um, and yeah, VPNs are an important part. Particularly, I like to think of security in three buckets. If you want to be digitally secure online, you need your devices, your internet connection, and your accounts all to be secure at any given time.
Hmm.
VPNs take care of that internet connection piece, right? So they're creating an encrypted tunnel from your device to the web service you're accessing, so that it can't be intercepted, no man in the middle attacks. That said, it's not a silver bullet, because it's not, VPNs aren't protecting you. If you click on a phishing link or go navigate somewhere that's hosting malware, you can still get your device infected, you can still get your credentials stolen. It's only really protecting against that one kind of layer of attack.
Hmm.
um, and like you said, it's not, not all VPNs are created equal. There are some VPNs that have very poor encryption. There's others that are, they are, linked to cyber criminal syndicates.
Hmm.
And so, you have to do your research and pick one that's good. But I do think that, especially with all of us working from home, it is a very important layer of security right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally. So kind of a thought that's kind of going along for me, just because I think this way throughout this whole conversation, is, on the digital currency front. So, someone like yourself that has this great knowledge in the cybersecurity space. I'm curious, are you a fan of Bitcoin? Or what are your thoughts on
I'm
Bitcoin?
not a Bitcoin holder, but
Yeah.
I do. I mean,
Because everything you're saying, I'm like, this person has to have Bitcoin.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so I love kind of your perspective on that overall, and why you may or may not be, if you'd like to chat about that, I'd be really curious.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of, I'm kind of unusual in that I didn't originally come from the tech space. Like,
Okay.
I'm actually very kind of low maintenance when it comes to, you know, I don't have like the latest gadgets all the time. I don't have like 60 different things that I'm trying out. But I am very big on privacy and security, and that's where I do truly believe in blockchain for sure.
Hmm.
How, whether in terms of, the application to cryptocurrency, whether that ends up, with Bitcoin or some other, next gen kind of version of cryptocurrency, I think is yet to be seen. But I do think that is it's again only a matter of time. I think the hardest thing about truly innovative things is that half of it's about timing. So
Hmm.
it could take a while to actually catch on, really more in mainstream. But I think that, um, uh, I think that, um, just the concept of distributed trust and kind of decentralization is a key kind of part of our future society.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I just yeah, just for me, just when it comes to just kind of the way that the algorithm or the machines basically run the system, right? And so what I just find so fascinating about Bitcoin is where hacks or malware or malicious things have happened haven't been at the Bitcoin code level, but have been at the essentially the entry points, right? So like an exchange or someone's wallet or social hacking or whatever. And
Yep.
so I'm a big fan of Bitcoin's privacy elements to it, but then the privacy kind of goes away depending on how you've obtained your Bitcoin, right? So like
Mhm.
if you've gone through and then the privacy and the security are affected based off of how you've obtained it to begin with. But like I don't know, I just find that fascinating. I'm gonna keep sending you information about that because I want my goal is to get you to become super pro on that, because I feel like your point of view in addition to that would be super awesome. So um when one of the kind of things that I was thinking about too is, okay, so we're in the Seattle area, and there's a very prominent person that lives here who got his information hacked, Jeff Bezos, with his whole in his personal life, right? And that's none of anybody's business what he does personally, right? But it definitely became that. What what kind of happened in that scenario? Because I think that's a good way for people to relate how cybersecurity, kind of, because I'm assuming if he's um, the richest person in the entire world, he probably has a team like devoted to his own personal security already, right? I'm assuming he's not operating the same way I am. I would hope, at least. But what are your thoughts on that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, I'll just caveat this by saying that I don't work directly with Jeff Bezos. He's not a client, so this is not in some sort of insider knowledge here. But I have worked with a lot of his peers, and the roots of our company started with doing security with billionaires and high net worth individuals, and I think the thing that, Jeff Bezos is a great example, not to make an example of him, but because almost every executive is exactly the same. And I think, we all do have this assumption that he works for Amazon, a very sophisticated security and technology company. They must have security on his personal devices or life, but they don't. And that's the reason for that is because of privacy and convenience. You made the point about antivirus is just like nobody loves their antivirus, right?
Hmm.
It's like security has always been a pain for the end user because it's like shoved down our throats
Hmm.
rather than being built for us. When
And
you
it's
think of the
also,
executive,
and I also
yeah,
feel like it's kind of like taught or brought about in like the you're going to go to hell model, right? Like
yeah,
salvation through that, as opposed to like, hey, like there's actually like really good reasons why you want to care about that. Too much
right.
fear, I think, too much fear tactics with it. So anyways, sorry, go
That's
ahead.
right. That's right. Well, then what happens when you do that is people want to do what they want to do, right?
Yeah.
And if you're going to prevent that with security, they're going to find ways around it, or they're just not going to allow it when it comes to their personal life.
Hmm.
And the thing with the Jeff Bezos hack is, in a nutshell, it's speculated that that was the Saudi government. It was a sophisticated kind of exploit that they infected his phone with. But the kind of broader point is that they didn't even try to hide the data exfiltration. They're siphoning out photos and emails and whatever else. There was a 29,000% increase in the data egrossing from his phone after that malware was installed. 29,000%.
Something like someone should have picked that up,
If
basically,
someone was
or
watching
some
that,
software. Yeah.
but no one was watching it because, again, going back to privacy, none of us want the companies that we work for to kind of big brother our personal life. We don't want to
Hmm.
be monitored and have them see everywhere we browse or what we do. And that, I think, is, like, this is again one of the things we're trying to solve at Rubica is you have to make privacy end user centric. It needs to be built with end user privacy in mind, and you need to not be forced to make a choice between privacy and security.
Yeah.
You should be able to have both.
And so, how likely would that the Saudi government or whatever have infiltrated his phone, like through malware, through like a email link type of thing? That simple?
Yeah, from what I understand, there was a video that he was sent in a WhatsApp conversation that was a when he clicked on that video, it supposedly installed malware on
Hmm.
his phone. The problem is this is all was retroactive forensics because nobody was actually monitoring the
Right.
device from a security perspective.
So it goes back to what you were saying at the beginning of the conversation, where like, yeah, the tunnel might be fine, in that WhatsApp scenario, but
Right.
then, from the tunnel to getting onto the device, yeah, that's very interesting. We're on a Zoom call right now, and Zoom has had some issues and some concerns about security. Have they fixed it, or is this gonna? Am I getting malware on my computer right now from this conversation?
Well, I'll tell you that I'm using a spare device for Zoom calls. This is
Oh,
not the same device that I use for work.
interesting.
Um,
I didn't even think about that. I think I'm gonna start doing that.
yeah, I do that just as a general precaution with, you know,
Yeah,
other things as well. But yeah, I think the thing with Zoom is, look, even like Microsoft has exploits and security holes that are found and that get patched. And, every software company has that. I think it's, the way that companies should be judged is based on how they respond, how quickly they respond, what their response is, and whether they make changes going forward. And I think the problem with Zoom is that there's just been a pattern of issues, both privacy and security.
so
Um,
even before the COVID-19 scenario.
yeah, yeah. We actually, as a company at Rubica, we used Zoom a number of years ago, and then found issues, and it was kind of banned internally.
Hmm.
We haven't used Zoom as a company for a while now.
What
And
do
so
you?
yeah, it started before the COVID stuff, but I think they obviously saw a huge, they went from like 2 million users to 200 million users or something in a number of weeks. That's they
Insane.
just clearly weren't prepared for. They
Sure.
didn't make security and privacy a priority in their kind of startup growth plan.
Sure,
And I
sure.
think
And that's
that's
and that's natural. I mean, like when
oh,
if you're thinking about a company at 2 million users versus 200, you're going to make some concessions, right? So you can't blame them for that.
yeah.
Um, Curious. So what do you use now? Let me take some notes. What do you use for video software, for video
Yeah.
conferencing and so forth?
Um, I'll say that good alternatives to Zoom are the Google and Microsoft products. Yeah.
Hmm.
And this is something that you have to kind of, I think, you have to keep on top of this though, because what's good today might not be good tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the bigger challenges with cybersecurity now is you can't just like kind of audit your stuff now and say, good, check the box next to security. I don't have to think about that anymore.
Yeah.
It's an ongoing thing. And at Rubica, we have a team of people that all they do is continuously vet different products, like all the time, like
Mm-hmm.
re-vet them because yeah, you never know how that's going to, cybersecurity changes every day. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So for some people, they might hear Google and Microsoft. I mean, I use Gmail, for example, so I'm not one of them. But some people might hear Google and Microsoft products, and in this conversation, around cybersecurity, they might think government backdoor. Is there any truth to that? Is that on certain items?
I can't speak explicitly to that, but I think that it is it is, we were talking before about how people just kind of become complacent with the information they've given up. And
Yeah.
what I see a lot is people kind of scrutinizing certain services. And then it's like, well, you use Gmail and Google. Like, what do
Right.
you think is happening? Like, they're mining your data. Now, whether they're just keeping that internally for their own,
Yeah.
optimization, or whether they're sharing that is another question. And I think that's where, when you start to unwrap that kind of ball of yarn, is where that's where privacy issues really start to emerge, because it's hard as a consumer to really know, even if you trust this company, do you trust the people they're sharing your data with? How do you even know who they're sharing that with?
Right. I found it hilarious when the Cambridge Analytica stuff happened with Facebook. Rightfully so, people were pissed. But you'd have people on Instagram saying how much they hated Facebook. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, like very intelligent people on Instagram, billionaire, tech people saying like how terrible Facebook is from their Instagram account. And so,
Right.
for those that aren't aware, Instagram is owned by Facebook. So, I thought that was, definitely pretty interesting. So I guess kind of the last question before we wrap, it just is evolved from this is, so with devices like that, when I was thinking about the government backdoor, it made me think about Apple phones, right? And so there's been like these interesting scenarios where um, a terrorist or some crazy act might have taken place, and they're like, hey, we need to unlock this person's phone. And as a result of that, like, well, we can't because of the way we take care of it. I'm curious how, like, kind of like the thought process all the way around that circle, from like the company side versus the government side versus the personal side, and just what your thoughts are overall.
Yeah, I think Apple, whether they did this consciously or not, made a really good choice in putting security at the kind of security and privacy at the center of their brand. But that doesn't mean that Apple isn't hackable. And I think, when you're talking about kind of government level tools that can crack into technologies, those tools are also being sold on the dark web and are in the hands of non-government groups. I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand, is that there's this dark web ecosystem that, when nation states attack each other, spy on each other, they don't do it directly. They use third-party groups that they contract with and privateers and to obscure, attribution. And a lot of the time those tools then get to be used by those third parties against private citizens and cybercrime. So we're only really hearing the tip of the iceberg. I think thinking that, like, it's definitely important that we have laws that forbid certain things and protect our privacy, and when the government can and can't do things, but that doesn't mean that those tools aren't just like available also to kind of the highest bidder.
Got it. Yeah, it's kind of like a nuclear bomb type of thing, right? It's like you might use nuclear energy for good to, I don't know, lighthouses and so forth, but or maybe like some level of just having in a stockpile. I mean, this is probably, I'm going with an extreme example here, but like if it gets in the wrong hands, it's like it's catastrophic, obviously. Yeah, I find that super interesting, right? Because it's like, sure, like if a bad person does a bad thing, like of course you would want to try to find all the evidence as to why they did these things and have access to it. But then if that means that every single person in the world also loses that privacy, it's a I don't even know where I stand on that, right? In that regard, I do obviously think, and I'm definitely like a self-sovereign privacy type of person. But when you start, it's interesting how like there's these little, I guess where maybe it's the pessimist side of me is that, like, while I'd like to think that the reason behind that would be strictly motivated by protecting people against, bad people, it always feels like it gets taken advantage of, right? It's like, so like that might be like the original intent is to say like, oh, we want to do this so that way if there is a terrorist, it does XYZ, like we have access to it. But then like the line gets crossed in the sand and it gets walked over,
Yeah,
right away.
that's the nature of all technology, though. I
Yeah.
think, you even look at like a lot of Trojan tools are exactly the same from a software component as remote desktop, like the kind of remote desktop tools that an IT administrator might use to get remote access and do stuff on your computer. That is the exact same kind of software that's used with in an unauthorized way by cyber criminals.
Yeah.
And I think that the thing that's kind of not caught up is some of our laws around. So, for example, it's not illegal to make malware. It's just illegal to use it for
Oh, interesting.
malicious purposes, right? So you can't like some of these, groups that have kind of become famous in various parts of the world for creating the malware that can hack into smartphones, etc. They're technically not doing anything illegal by making it. You're just not allowed to use it
That's an
in an
interesting.
unauthorized way.
Yeah.
It's not illegal to make a gun or a hammer. It's illegal to use it to kill someone.
Yeah. That's super interesting. Yeah, it goes back to the tool, like how the tool is used. Super interesting. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. What are some things that like what's the minimum that someone can do, who's listening to this, to keep themselves secure? What's the absolute minimum they can do? Just not go
Yeah, the
online ever.
minimum.
I'm just
I mean,
kidding.
I
I'm hanging up right now.
Um, it's unfortunately there isn't like a silver bullet for cybersecurity anymore. I think that what it's become is kind of like it's as complicated now as taxes and health. Like you could try to self-diagnose yourself with a disease, or you could try to do your own taxes, but at the end of the day, you probably need a professional to help you with that.
Hmm.
And I would say, again, in terms of things you can do to help yourself, if you're a self-help kind of person, you really need to think of those three areas: your devices, your internet connection, your accounts, and you need something to secure all three of those areas. And I think, there's, like you said, there's VPNs, there's patching your devices is a huge, very easy thing, keeping all your software up to date. And it's something that not a lot of people do. It's an easy backdoor for cyber criminals if you're not keeping everything up to date: browsers, operating system, apps. And hopefully more companies like Rubica will start showing up to give people more options for how you can, both have um, practical and easy to deploy security, but security that actually secures all three of those areas in a way that works for our personal lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, awesome. Those are great tips. I'll have to get those from you offline, and we can put them in the notes
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
So with that, last question I love to ask is, what's a question that you have that you would like to give to our listeners or have them think about, or what's a question that you want people to think about, as they go about their day or as they go about what they're doing in their lives right now?
Ooh, that is a great question. Um, what price would you put on your family's security and privacy? I think that a lot of times where security and privacy take a back seat, or where uh, we don't actually consciously think about like investing in that in our personal lives. And by investing, I don't necessarily mean spending loads of money, but really making it a priority.
Hmm.
Prevention, as they say, um, an ounce of prevention is worth uh, a million in reaction. So I would just say, go about your day thinking about what your privacy and security truly mean to you, and what you're willing to do to protect those proactively rather than reactively.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Great. Well, Francis, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. What are the best ways that people can get in touch with you or in touch with your company?
Yeah, our website has a lot of good information, and our phone number and email to contact us at. It's rubica.com. And actually, right now we're running a 30-day campaign where we're supporting Feeding America. We talked earlier about cybersecurity being one of the secondary downside effects of the coronavirus. So is food insecurity.
Hmm.
So what we're
Yeah.
doing is, trying to encourage people protect yourself, and and protect yourself digitally, and also support our neighbors in need. So for the next 30 days, we're donating all proceeds from Rubica subscriptions to Feeding America. So
That's
if you're
awesome.
interested in that, you can find more
Wow.
info on our website. And we're always available if you have questions about cybersecurity and privacy. We do a lot of just consultations and chats on the phone. So reach out if you have questions.
Awesome. That's great. What a great initiative. I guess last question is, what's your password?
It's password, of course,
Yeah,
with an exclamation point at the end.
password 1 2 3 4. Great.
Yeah.
Well, well, everybody, thank you so much for listening and watching to another episode of the TF podcast. Again, please make sure that you are subscribed on our YouTube channel as well as on the various podcast platforms. You can also make sure that you're following us at TF Blockchain and myself at JG Product. And please, if you like this show, do us a favor and review, fill in those stars for us so we can get these great conversations with more people. Thanks a lot. We'll talk soon.